So now let's look at the ways to compromise that session token. Starting with simple session prediction. We're analyzing how the website generates session IDs because it's got to make up those session IDs somehow. It's going to generate them, usually in some kind of auto-incrementing process. So we analyze it, and then based on our analysis, we predict or guess what we think the next valid ID value will be. So like, for example, look at this example. If I zoom in here a bit, we're looking at a GET request, blah, 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 blah. Here's the important part, cookie. JSession ID equals user1. Well, if they're doing something as silly as user1, user2, user3, maybe user2 is our next choice. So that is a simple example of session prediction. Another one is just simply sniffing. Let's use a sniffer to capture a valid session token or session ID, because a token is the ID. And remember, a token is just it's either a little string in a cookie or it's a key value pair, which is just a number and some little string. And then we'll just reuse the token unless the user has actually logged out. So here we are sniffing here, and we have this user who has like normal connection, and they're doing everything in HTTP clear text, or we have inserted ourselves man in the middle. But remember that hijacking is not about man in the middle per se. So we're watching this, and we can see the session ID, the token is some string like this. While they're still doing their thing, let's steal it right out of Wireshark, and let's also ourselves use that same token going to the web server. The web server will just simply think that the same user has two connections, not realizing that one of the connections is us, the attacker. We could do cross-site scripting attacks, and more on cross-site scripting soon. So we could use cross-site scripting to steal the token. Now, cross-site scripting is a whole thing in itself, which has its own things. The bottom line of cross-site scripting, which we will talk about in other contexts, is we post some malicious, typically JavaScript, on a website, and somebody, while reading that post, in the background, they're running that script. And one of the things that the script could be doing is to actually steal the cookie. So JavaScript actually has a code. It has a property called document.cookie right here. That actually will read and capture cookies. And then you can have something in your script to send it to the attacker. So in our example here, what we've done is maybe there's a blog or a Facebook post or something where users can upload their own stuff. And one of the things we're uploading is, hey, I did something really funny yesterday, and people are reading it. But in the background, there is this malicious JavaScript using the document.cookie property as part of a script. So notice how this is done, script, da 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 da. Now, this code you're looking at here simply raises an alert, reading the person's cookie and putting it in the alert. And see this script in angle brackets? That's, of course, an XML tag. So what happens is when they read whatever, in the background, they're running that script which has stolen their session ID, their cookie, and has actually put it right into this alert. But you would not, if you're really doing this, you wouldn't have their browser suddenly see a pop-up that shows their own cookie. No, no, no. This is just an example. What you would actually do is you wouldn't use in your script the alert. You would use this and then send it over to you, the attacker. So that's using cross-site scripting. Another thing is we could do a man-in-the-middle attack. We could insert ourselves into an existing session to intercept messages, and man-in-the-middle, we cover that in other places. And there are various techniques, but what we do is we split the TCP connection. So in man-in-the-middle, you have the victim user, the web server, and then you. Now, ordinarily, they're just talking to each other directly like this. But in man in the middle, you put yourself here. So there's a session between you and the victim and you and the web server. Two actual sessions called splitting the TCP session. They both think they're talking to each other, but you're actually relaying between them. And then we can have some kind of sniffer going to capture the cookie that way. Now, man in the middle is a whole other beast, but that is a mechanism for stealing the cookie. So once we're in the middle, we can then, of course, read, modify, insert fraudulent data as we please. And we could also capture the session cookie or the token by reading the HTTP header. And then we can change the amount of money in a transaction or do whatever we like. Now, another method is something called man in the browser attack. So what we do is we have to infect the user with a Trojan horse. And the Trojan horse actually infects the browser, and it puts itself in the middle. It intercepts calls between the browser and the browser's security mechanisms and its library codes. And usually, man in the browser, the objective is to manipulate like internet banking transactions, but man in the browser could also conceivably just be used to steal cookies. So a classic man in the browser attack, if we were manipulating internet banking transactions, would be like this. You've got a normal user here, and this is what they see. So this is what's in their browser. Then the bank on this side sees this, and here you are in the middle. You've managed to Trojanize the person's browser by having them click a link in Facebook or something, or you've sent them an email or something that they've clicked and downloaded. They think they're sending money to the gas company, and the gas company's account is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they think they're paying the gas company $50. In reality, what you're doing is the user enters this, but your Trojan is manipulating this connection to its mechanisms in the background and changing the values. So by the time it actually goes to the bank, which the user, by the way, doesn't see, what happens in the background is the name of the payee has been changed to you with a totally different account number and a very different amount. So the user thinks they're sending this, but you're manipulating it in the background. The bank actually sees this. So that's man in the browser attack. And we can use it, of course, to capture cookies and session tokens, as well as doing this. And we might even capture the cookies and the session tokens as part of the online banking fraud. So those are some of the most common ways to compromise a session cookie token.